Indeed, what we are currently experiencing is corruption in absolute terms. And by that, I mean the glaring deficit in enviable national character and general moral rectitude. It is a problem that runs through our social strata, and most unfortunately, our youths have caught the bug. This is the more reason why the problem is putting the future of the country at stake. One thing that should be of immediate concern is the negative reckoning this has put us in development ratings among the nations of the world. For years on end, we remain a net importer of petroleum products, despite huge deposits of crude oil, of which we are incapable of producing what is barely required for local consumption. The result of the turnaround maintenance in our refineries and the huge financial boats which accompanied them remain a pathetic mystery. Today, despite our huge deposits of tin and bauxite, iron and gold, and a plethora of all solid minerals, our nation is still ranked among the countries with low human development in the world. Hence, my allusion to the world backwardness. Specifically placed in number 156 in a serial ranking of 187 countries, Nigeria is always behind Libya, Mauritius, and Tunisia, which are ranked 64,000 or 64, 77, and 94 respectively, and we are among the high human development countries. We are behind Algeria, we are behind Egypt, we are behind Botswana, we are behind South Africa, Morocco, Ghana, Equatorial Guinea, and Congo, which are all placed in that order among the medium human development countries where our country is placed. We are still behind Kenya, Sao Tome and Principe, Angola, Cameroon, Madagascar, and Senegal. Those are just the African countries I'm mentioning to you here. You cannot imagine how many nations of the lesser human and material endowments across the continents of the world area ranked ahead of Nigeria, and who by implication are running the affairs of our dear country in human better ways than us. Such is the level of degradation we have thrown ourselves as a people. Never mind that there is always a paid official of the government whose job it is to dismiss such statistics as mere rubbish. These are challenges we are facing in our time today. The common belief today is that security challenges pose the greatest threat to our existence as a nation. Of course, armed insurgency and threats to national peace by Boko Haram, militants in the Niger Delta, and kidnappers are fallouts of a festering tradition of greed, galloping corruption with reckless impunity in high places. As Socrates stated, the unexamined life is not worth living. It is high time we began as a people to excoriate and excommunicate people found guilty of corruption, particularly in our professional and social gatherings, if any serious and meaningful progress will be made in tackling the scourge. This is part of the overcoming. Permit me to say that the brand of corruption in Nigeria today transcends the stealing of public funds, the stashing away of which has earned us the 7th place in the world. According to a recent survey, it is also embalmed in the kinds of wages our leaders allot to themselves, thus appropriating as we were once told by one who should know, and that is the governor of the central bank, that some 25% of budgeted recurrent expenditures goes to the political class and their appendages. Of course, they would have thought that that is what the law says they should earn. But who made these laws? The story of political office holders, whether in the executive or legislature, is a sorry departure from the glorious order of old. Today, you are confronted with an exhaustive list of advisors and special advisors, assistants to special assistants alike. It's a challenge. We have surely created ingenious ways and outlets of draining resources out of a petrodollar dependent and monolithic economy. Our gains as a nation are without doubt self-inflicted. The story is not radically different in the judicial arm, which unfortunately is relied upon as the bastion of hope. Beginning with a period of horrendous plea bargaining, it needed no soothsayer to realize that those acts practically open I call it a Pandora box in terms of the massive public funds pilfering that followed. Some members of the judiciary condoned through technicalities with the sole aim of truncating justice, and that in essence fostered a high degree of criminality. particularly in public service. The most recent evidence of judicial malfeasance was exhibited in the case of a man called John Yakubu, who was alleged to have stolen 25 billion naira of police pension funds. According to reports, he claimed that the prosecutors lied. All that he stole was 20 billion. He was found guilty and sentenced to a disgusting 2 years imprisonment. Confusion was confounded. He was given an option of fine to purchase sum of 750,000 naira. That was the height of making mockery of not only the criminal procedure in our courts, it also cast a serious aspersion on the judicial as a whole. As Jane Rosian observed, it is not the criminal things which are hardest to confess, but the ridiculous and shameful. I'm still seriously perturbed about how one can rationalize this one case of John Yakubu. How many people have died in this country without having received a penny of their pensions after many years of waiting? How many have collapsed and died while waiting on long and endless queues to collect peanuts as pensions? I should like to appeal to the government to take both steps towards bringing corruption to its barest minimum in this country. It was John Locke who said that the freedom of men under government is to have a standing rule to live by. Common to everyone is that society, and not to be subject to inconstant, unknown, and arbitrary will of another man. That aptly applies to our current constitution that we are required to do. Government should provide for all and be fair to all. Our educational system ought to be made more functional and guided to address our national needs and aspirations. Government must necessarily diversify the economy to widen its revenue base, and all accruing revenues must be judiciously spent and meticulously accounted for. We should be done with impunity and governmental arrogance. No section of the populace should be made to enjoy undue advantage over the others. No part of any state or local government should enjoy excessive patronage to the detriment of others. There should be no double standard. The nation must entrench the rule of law. It is extremely imperative, as our late elder statesman Chief Obapo Milewa once said, the government is like the sun. It must shine on everybody. I saw a challenge too of retirement of 2 judges in our judiciary. The compulsory retirement of Justice Achipong of the Federal High Court and T.D. Naron of the Plateau High Court is a welcome reminder that the provision and the process exists in the governance of the Nigerian judiciary to read off. The NJC investigation found Justice Achipong guilty of misconduct in a case concerning a catalog of charges of multi-billion naira malfeasance against an SY senior banker, while Justice Naron's misconduct was he's been in continuous and illicit telephone correspondence with both a litigant and his counsel in the gubernatorial election petition case. These are challenges we are facing. Given the several unfortunate instances degrading the Nigerian judiciary, proven acts of misconduct by judges sound the death knell on the integrity of every other Nigerian judge and that of every officer in the temple of justice. Misconduct of any kind in any place is condemnable. An initiative and sanctions to disinfect the judiciary, however, have to be conducted with fairness, vigor, and thoroughness in line with the hopes raised by Chief Justice Aloma Mokhtar to cleanse the judiciary. It is indeed intriguing to find that since she assumed office, Nigeria has just seen the first example of actions against alleged aberrant judges. In reasons for Justice Naron's compulsory retirement, NJC highlighted the confirmation of relationships with politicians and the legal counsel in the Osun State Gubernatorial Tribunal. It is perhaps fair to say his case is comparatively straightforward and his compromise of judicial neutrality palpable. The question is, would the NJC discern what activates this manner of failure of judgment that renders a sitting judge so vulnerable to these blatant overtures? It's a very great challenge in our judiciary. In the extant matter, why is the NJC cannot be expected to read minds and motives, but rather to rely on the evidence and materials found at the crime scene, as it were? It is important to caution that interpreting the actions of these judges, NJC should assure Nigerians that new mistakes in a new direction are not being created. A rush to judgment, accusations without defense, and a glee for punishment to satisfy the bonds, the hounds, and the mood of the times. Evidence and the process should be scrupulously exhausted, leading to judgment, and then the high principles to sanction will be ennobled. Nigeria needs a judiciary in its prime time form. In the matter of Achibonga Nation and Naron, whereas the term misconduct may be a subtext for material corruption in euphemism for the despicable acts, and NJC should in the future endeavor to be specific and exhaustive in its pronouncement on each judicial officer and leave no room for conjectures on its investigation and findings. And since the council wields the discretion of investigation, the power of sanctions, such a model of openness will assist in curbing the frequent allegations of undue grief and graft being viral in the portals of justice. It must be stated that no institution can be immune to the ravages of society in which it exists, at least not forever. In the light of tales of remuneration and pensions for public servants, this may be a good time to cancel that all matters that end to distract judicial officers or make them susceptible to inducements should be proactively solved. Provisions for housing, even post-retirement, personal and family transportation, healthcare and family education constitute critical security and social welfare schemes may handily be introduced to shield judges from being unduly influenced as they deploy themselves to impartiality in the discharge of their oaths. As of Enugu Judiciary, we call upon the government to do something in appointing more judges urgently to help decongest the loads of cases facing each judge in Enugu State now, whereby many are being delayed and the judges stressed out. The NJC should please understand this predicament and not think that Enugu Judiciary is unproductive. Many of you may not know that no judge has been appointed from Enugu State Judiciary because NJC said that Enugu Judiciary is unproductive. And when I was finding out why, they said not that they're unproductive, but that the judges are not enough. Hence, a judge is having over 1,000 cases in his court. How do you dispense justice? Challenge of poverty. Our Christian preaching and ministry should find ways of addressing poverty. Jesus Christ was concerned. One such case is that of the Good Samaritan parable, which is interpreted usually as suggesting Jesus encouraging his disciples to meet the acute need of the people. Almost the ending of this New Testament teaching seems to put a high premium on selfless caring for the afflicted. It's as far as you have done it to the least of these, my brothers, you have done it to me. The emphasis is on immediate action, on feeding the hungry, on clothing the naked, healing the sick, visiting the oppressed, and bringing comfort to the afflicted. To hang on to wealth when others are in need receives continuous condemnation from the Bible writers. This tradition is maintained by the early church fathers as well as by a whole series of the discoveries of radical and the levelers. To John and Charles Wesley as a Christian tradition of responding to disasters and emergencies based on biblical standards. We Christians are more easily persuaded that the gospel demands action in our emergency than we are that it demands a constant commitment to the poor and the oppressed. In responding to mass poverty in our age of plenty, the churches have become stuck with a specific concept of the problem and of their role in response to that problem. The concept of churches on the problem of poverty is not false, but inadequate and largely self-defeating, which has ineffective attempts while the real issues are neglected or not identified. The exploitation of the weak by the strong is an issue so fundamental to the well-being of the people, as such is the current theme in the biblical account of the love of God for mankind. The coming of Jesus Christ is a demonstration of God's love for the powerless, the weak, and the oppressed. The churches have been involved in development since the early days of missionary enterprises. That is why the missionaries came to us in Africa with schools, hospitals, and agriculture. The church came with this confronting ignorance, disease, and poverty. Our present church cannot afford to do less. Furthermore, to our mission work should be referred to as love in practice. Our Christian faith had to be shown to be able to love our neighbor. Many missionaries indeed expected their works to communicate the real nature of the gospel more effectively than their preaching or teaching. Faith without action is nothing, isn't it? Communicative activities of all kinds were therefore part of the mainstream work of the mission, from orphanages to hospitals, from asylums to girls' hostels, from workshops for the blind to the school of deaf and dumb. The people this time are suffering at various levels through illness, unemployment, sudden impoverishment, homeless, persecution, or the deprivation of liberty. I believe this is not the mind of God. Therefore, when we find in the world a state of things which is not in line with what we know about our faith, as we see from the scriptures, our concern must be a way of ending it. Christians who have genuine conversion understand the depth they owe to Christ and having true lines of gospel and known his message for transformation of life, know that they are committed to a life-changing message. So, we as Christians, through the message of the gospel, seek for the redressing of economic imbalances in our nation. We must seek for the establishment of welfare schemes for our people. The unemployed must have attention. The handicap of physical challenged people should be taken care of. The elderly must be cared for. There should be no reason for our streets to be littered with beggars and the mentally challenged. These issues must be addressed. We are also aware of the way things are going on in our nation today. There's no doubt that times are not favorable. If a way of life is unjust, it must be continually challenged. We as Christians should take seriously the possibility that the present serious poverty rate and degradation is a result of God's judgment on our greed, because we have not honored God in our economic life. He has given us over to the consequences of our passion to possess. The poor must get the good news which will liberate them from poverty. Talking about the word evangelism challenge. Evangelism is the most important duty of the church. But so many sectors of the church are seriously deficient in their approach to the gospel. Today's preaching and teaching of the gospel is suffering much of distortion. We also know, and we all know, that there are many churches today with no serious moral impact to society. It's a challenge. One of the reasons are the emphasis by some preachers on act of faith in Jesus Christ without need for repentance or a radical turning away from a life lived in isolation from God. The impression often is that salvation is what is earned when the person makes a decision for Christ. People tend to measure the success of our outreach by the number of people who came out for altar call, which is basically for one need or the other after a simple message of the gospel, which is called conversion. Some of these converts could not be said to be genuine because true repentance is not emphasized. This in practice leads to a shallow view of the holy and just character of God and of his demands for a complete transformation of all life's relationship. Conversion by its meaning is nothing but a deliberate conscious turning away from every form of idols to the living God. Another kind of distortion of the gospel preaching is presenting the Christian faith as a shopping center where certain emotional needs could be discovered and responded to. By that, the impression is that the gospel is being made relevant. Most times, Jesus Christ is proclaimed as the one who can produce permanent happiness, whose content are such things as self-identity, self-respect, belonging, achievement, emotional stability, personal relationship, and acceptance. Yes, there is a true sense in which Christ fulfills our needs, though often in ways we do not expect. However, the gospel is about much more than the true source of personal fulfillment. It is more a call to radical discipleship, which inevitably involves suffering as disciples struggles against both the personal and social effects of human sin. We must in our message present also the old rugged cross, that I may know him and the power of resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering. Another thing about the gospel which is not preached today is love in action. In biblical teachings, if faith does not involve active love towards all human beings, its need, it cannot be an authentic response to God's promises. The Christian faith has to do with relationship among human beings as against individualism. It involves being peacemakers for the sake of others and not just peace lovers within one's own life. A person then is not saved by profession of faith. They are saved by God's grace, which is appropriated by faith, and the reality of which is demonstrated by a lifestyle of caring for others. God's justice is fulfilled in a new relationship between the believers and God, and also in the building of new relationship between people and communities, where such relationship has been destroyed by greed, selfishness, fears, vested interests, and obsessions about law, order, and authority. This is all salvation as proclaimed by the gospel. Our salvation message should be holistic, that is, body, soul, and spirit of the person must be ministered to. The challenge of our time, as far as the gospel preaching is concerned, is that people are trying to present the gospel as a consumer product. With this in mind, the gospel is being presented as a market product so that it has to be sold in a highly competitive market. This assumption leads to the idea of making the gospel ministry as attractive and less offensive as possible in order that there might be the highest possible return in investment. This counts for why a program of a church is measured by how much spent and the income generated after. There are Christian organizations obsessed by the exact relationship between expenditure and decisions for Christ. Somebody was telling me, how much are we going to gain if we come to your diocese or come to Enugu for a program? He's not thinking about the souls to be won, but thinking about how much money they will make from offering. In this, there is the risk of using the ends in justifying the means by making it easier for people to respond with a formal declaration of belief. I believe that the diocese shall rise up from this synod and set up a system that is workable in order to ensure that the true message of the gospel is being preached to the people. We must be ready in this time of our changing world to find a way of presenting the gospel without distortion or error. This is a time for more serious discipleship. It's a pity that we have fewer laborers in the field today, but we can say that we have professionals, marketers, and consumers. But laborers, if there's any, are few. When Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they are harassed and helpless, like sheep without a sheep. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send our laborers into this harvest field. We have so many hired men and women today who are more self-conscious and less Christ-conscious, who have no serious passion for the gospel. That is the time we are in. We must, as a matter of commitment, sit down, re-examine our evangelism this time on the ends of and means. We must note that the end does not justify the means, because means either enhance the message or distract from it. Therefore, we must, as a church, consider the means as well as the end, how they fit in God's purpose. The challenge of our time and how to overcome it, finally. Although the message of Revelation chapter 2 applies to the experiences of the specific churches, they were written too. They are also prophetic of the experience of the church through the centuries. Each of the letters also contains admonitions appropriate to God's people in every age. Having looked at the above letter to the church as minor, and having considered the background, it will be considered that this letter has a lot in common with the Church of God today in Nigeria. The background can be compared with the background of prosperity and wealth that rules our society and country today. We live in a time when business interests, political interests, and all manner of loss and greed rule the life of men. Men project personal interests up and above what interests God. The fear of God is completely expunged from the society, our national character, and even the church. Terrorism against the church and its proponent is now very prevalent, especially for believers living in the northern part of Nigeria and those living in Asian countries where violent oppositions to the gospel exist. For those of us living in church-friendly environments like here in Enugu, we have false believers creeping into the church and corrupting the true message of Christ, just like the Jews who claim to know God but are referred to as synagogue of Satans by Christ himself. Men emphasize ill-gotten wealth rather than godliness. Even the church has gradually shifted from preaching the bitter and sweet truth of the gospel because this is not convenient for the ears of the hearers. They rather preach what the people want to hear than preach what God wants. Bishop Mwabia, where is he? He was here. I was in the diocese to preach at the synod. And because I was condemning corruption in Abia State, that even the local government could not grade the road to where he had synod. Somebody left the church, the chairman who knew he was not doing well, to tell the deputy governor who was coming in that I was challenging the government of Abia State. And the man raised in and was talking of rubbish while I was in the pulpit. And I told the man, please, will you sit down and listen to what I'm saying? I lambasted him and repeated what I said. That if there's going to be transformation in the society, or probably in the church.
In your view, my Lord Bishop, what is your stand in this theme, overcoming the challenges of the time?
By the grace of God, this is a team that meets with the expectations of the time. What do we as Christians, what will we be saying in a time like this? Rather than to be asking God for spiritual strength and the vigor in order to be able to live in a time like this, a dangerous time, as you can see or hear during the presidential address. He took time to difficult time to manage the church in a time like this. And so, it is a wonderful thing. And it is also a thing that brings out the realities of Christianity. And so, in a time like this, it is important for us to know that it is Christ that we have to depend upon God prayerfully. And also to live a life of witnessing. It's not just by preaching or by telling people we are Christians, but also by living out the life. And so, as you can see, the Christian life is a life of bearing the cross of Christ. Without the cross, our Christianity has no meaning. And so, it is a real time that God loves us who are in His kingdom.
Thank you, my Lord.
Yes.
Thank you, my Lord.
God bless.
The theme we are talking about is that God wants us to understand. And as far as we are concerned today, we should not be expecting a Messiah as a leader. And everyone should understand that things are difficult. Things are very hard. And we should work very hard to keep up to the standards of God. There is no need for us to look at what the government is doing and then join in corruption and evil practices, trying to cut corners here and there. The best for us now is to look up to God, because as far as the Christian world is concerned, God is the only one we need to salvage this nation from this corruption that we are talking about. Thank you, my Lord. God bless you. Thank you.
I think the Lord Bishop have expressly told us quite a lot of things. But to compact the things he has said, I deduce that number one, we need to put together a team that will study this work and then begin to marshal out one after the other the issues raised, so that we will be able to work very hard in putting in line all that he has said in order to get a result too. This prognostic team must look ahead of us, because if you watch what the bishop have done is to look ahead of Nigeria beyond the 2015 elections that are coming. And then number three, the issue of change must be taken very seriously. If we continue the way we've been walking, we cannot get to the promised land. The challenges are very okay. During the Bible study, we discovered that Revelation is the blockbuster. In Exodus chapter 6, verse 3, God came to tell Moses that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob knew him as the Lord God Almighty. But now he's revealing to him who he is, the sovereign Lord. In Hebrew, the Rabbonic Shal El Olam, that is the master of the times. He is the master of the times, who knows what to do at each point in time. So dealing with the challenges of our time, we must come from the point of revelation, which the bishop clearly stated. And then finally, it's important for Nigeria to be open and the church as well to embrace change. We cannot continue the way it is. Looking at the way he illustrated the issue of the Pope, Ratzinger, that's Benedict, who left and said, look, it's enough for me. And also looking at the issue of the nation, coming to a point that we must tell ourselves the truth in order to move on. I think it's a wonderful work, and if the prognostic team can go down to look at it, we will get a very good result from this whole work. Thank you, sir. Thank you. God bless you.
Paradigm to measure and overcomer as regards to this thing, overcoming the challenges of times?
Paradigm to measure and overcomer. It's a very complex word, but if you ask me, let me reduce it in the context of the synod theme, which our Lord Bishop has just very eloquently espoused. One, the paradigm to measure and overcome is that this one must be ready to anticipate suffering. We are in perilous times, and even when we go through tribulations and difficult times, it should not be a strange thing. Number two, as we go through suffering, we should not cower us, because he who has already gone through says, I know your tribulations, I know your works, fear none of these things. So the confidence that even when we are in suffering, he is there with us. We shall not be overwhelmed. Another aspect of it is the fact that an overcomer is an uncompromising Christian. He doesn't fear what come may be. He stands for the truth, just like that last hymn we sang. Courage, brother, do not stumble. Uncompromising. Hebrews 12:1 says, see, because we have an exceeding crowd of witnesses, let us run the race with patience. Let us lay aside every weakness and the sin that so easily besets, and run the race set before us with patience, uncompromising. Speak the truth, live right. Live right. Some may hate you, some may love you, some may not like the look of your word, but live for what is meant. That's what the church in Smyrna did. And thirdly is the fact, do the work of an evangelist. That was the bulk of the last of the bishop's message. Do the work of the evangelist. We're in perilous times, times when people will not love to hear the truth. They want it to be painted in the way they want to hear, and in the words are sweetened. The Bible says they will have itching ears. So do the work of the evangelist. As you do that, as Matthew also told us, make disciples. Let it not just be the preaching, but let it also be those who can run the kingdom and be there. And finally, let there be love in action, fitly demonstrated that you've also seen it. The love of Christ is shed abroad in our hearts. So, as we also preach the gospel, live uncompromisingly. Let our lives and our preaching be such that runs to the rest of the people to show practical demonstration.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ụmụ Chineke anyị amụtawo na amara Chineke agaghị ekwe o. Ndị sị mmadụ kwenu o. Bịanụ. Bịanụ. Anyị abịawo n'iru Jehova. Thank you, thank you, thank you.